Good evening. Hello. Hope you had a good week. We've had an exciting week here. It's been a week in which we've had the apple picking. We've had the odd windfall before now, but the last few days we've really had the bulk of the apples come in, and so it's been clearing everything off the floor in the kitchen so we can get the big tubs out and wash them, and watching our little lad playing and scrubbing the apples and playing in the water. It's just been beautiful. A real sense of the seasons have shifted, but there's this fruitfulness. Everything is, it smells of the fresh apples and the dampness of the earth. It's just been a glorious few days. It's been an exciting week as well. We're getting ready for next week. Next week being our virtual church holiday, we pushed it back this year just to fit around the rest of our scheduling, and it's going to be an exciting time. There's some things that we can't wait to share together, and I hope that we're able to deliver that in a way that is as much of a blessing to you as it has been studying it and getting ready for it. So tonight we're going to start with a little bit of a preview, if you like, a little bit of a warm-up, something to be thinking about as we go into next week's series. And we're going to start with some very familiar verses that speak about our relationship to God in our service and in our relationships to one another. But before we get to that, I want to talk to you about some of my favorite places. You know, there's something that every stage, every studio, every sound stage, every rehearsal space, whether it's Old Studio B in Nashville or the vast sound stages that we use as movie sets, whether in Old Hollywood or in Pioneer in the UK, or even the BBC sound recording studios where the orchestra record music for the TV shows, whether it's Abbey Road with all of its heritage and fame, or it's some little local studio, even down to my own sort of rehearsal space with my guitars hung on the wall. There's something they all have in common. And it's that when you first walk in, particularly at the start of the day, there is an almost tangible weight of silence in the space. It's hard to describe just how sort of thick the atmosphere of silence is. And some of those spaces have instruments which have produced the sounds of generations. Now, there are pianos in some of the rehearsal spaces I had the privilege to be in that have been played for records and music that generations now have listened to, that have defined the sound of really the second half of the 20th century in terms of rock music, or certainly gospel sounds, you know, instruments that have all that potential, guitars that are heirlooms, historical monuments, practically, when you think about the players that have played them and the recordings they have appeared in, or the performances they've been a part of. Even in my own little space, when I walk in, those instruments on the wall have been played all over the world. From the cheap guitar I bought to fly with because an airline wouldn't let me take my good instruments in a way that was safe, all the way through to the treasured, unique instruments that I have that I've been privileged to play, that I've played in places that I dreamt of as a kid. They all have stories, they have history, they have potential, and yet when you walk in, whether it's a place where the legends of the musical forms that I have participated in have been, or it's just my own space with my own thoughts, there is the same silence. It is tangible. It is present. It's the almost deafening expectancy, this sudden shift in the atmosphere that happens as a player steps into the space. Because no matter how well equipped, no matter how storied or infamous or famous the space, no matter who has been there before, until you enter that space, no sound will take place. There will be no music without a player. Those instruments cannot record a single note without you. No studio ever produced a record without the presence of the people whose creativity were required to take those lifeless things and give them power. We're going to read from 1 Peter 5. This coming week, we're thinking about this idea of being instrumental in the hands of God. That is to say, being those that he uses. He uses in his purpose, in his way, according to his plan. And in 1 Peter 5, Peter is writing to folks in fellowship who are all considering what their place is and who should be doing what and how they should do it and what their relationship should be and how should they treat those that they have to care for and how should they respond to those who have to give instruction. And he writes this. This is starting halfway through verse 5. All of you, clothe yourselves with humility towards one another, because God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that he may exalt you at the proper time, casting all your care on him, because he cares about you. All of you clothe yourselves. The phrase literally means wrap yourself, tightly bind yourself with humility towards one another. This isn't simply talking about humbling ourselves under the hand of God in relation to God, which seems obvious, but to live under the hand of God with humility, to only present ourselves for his use and his service if we do so with an acknowledgement that we are surrounded by others. And we're not seeking to serve so that we might have a title or a position or authority or so that we might be able to carve out a space for ourselves, but rather we are saying, here I am, and you, God, have the power. You, God, have the ability. You have the wisdom. You have the plan. And so I'm not here because they couldn't do it. And I'm not here because I think I should have special place or special authority. I'm here because I love you. I'm here because I love those other people who are standing here with me. You see, when we think about a musical instrument, when I think about my guitars that are hanging on the wall downstairs, the sound of an instrument depends entirely on the hand of the instrumentalist. It can't play itself, so there's no room for us to boast about or compete for our position. God doesn't pick up the proud. And if God isn't going to pick you up, there's no chance that you'll participate in this extraordinary thing that he is doing. You won't be a sound for salvation. You won't be a sound for his glory. You won't be a sound to draw others to the forgiveness and the mercy and the grace and the healing of Jesus Christ. You won't have a place if he doesn't lift you up. The Bible's quite clear. Without him, we can do nothing. God, I want to serve your purpose has to begin with, God, I'm willing for you to do what you like with my life. I'm willing for you to play whatever sound you choose to play. God, I don't have a list of, well, these positions seem to be appropriate, or this part in your plan seems to suit my personality. You know, God, I realize you don't need me, but I love you. And I love your people, and I love the people that you've put me amongst. And God, I believe that even in my life, you can do something. So here I am. Here I am. The sound of the instrument is completely dependent on the hand of the instrumentalist. So there's no place for us to demand that everyone plays our tune or arranges the music to suit our desires, wants, personality, or particular agenda. God doesn't change his set list or his message. God isn't going to adjust his plan or his program to compromise what he can bring into the lives of others simply to accommodate you or I. Years ago, I played in a student band with the rather cheesy name of Damascus Road. And we just did a few little bits together. We mostly led worship for sort of student events, but we did a few concerts. And one of the biggest challenges we had was there were a couple of old folk rockers. And then we had a drummer who was an incredibly gifted, talented jazz drummer, but really couldn't abide any other style of music. And we made him play pretty much straight, flat rock a lot of the time. And I remember sitting down one day and talking about, well, does this band have a future apart from fulfilling a need? And the answer was, well, not really, because none of us really want to listen to the same music that we're playing. And those of us who can cope with that music, it's all very well, but at the heart of our sound is this amazing drummer. But every time we play, he has to grit his teeth and sit through an hour of music that he really does not enjoy or appreciate. What was amazing was that for the purpose of the season that we were in, he was willing to put in the time and to rehearse and to do the things that were necessary in order to make that sound. I often think about that when I'm in a situation where the way someone wants to express themselves doesn't suit me, where the way in which they want to talk about scripture comes from a place or a tradition that I don't understand. It's not that we should hold our traditions so precious that we won't deviate from them for others, but rather that when someone else expresses themselves, I have to go to God and say, Spirit of God, would you show me the truth in this? Would you show me what they really understand? Would you translate for me? They might be using words that are in my English language, but maybe they mean something completely different. God, I want to serve your purpose. Well, I'm going to send you to people that don't look like you, don't sound like you, don't think like you, don't talk like you, and don't understand the things that to you seem obvious and precious. So you're going to have to learn a new way to communicate. You're going to have to learn a new expression of the same truth. Oh, okay, Lord. I'm going to send you to people that will require you to dress differently or they won't hear your message. Oh, okay, Lord. I'm going to send you to people whose worship is a style that you find very hard to engage with. Oh, well, okay, Lord. It's not that God deliberately goes out of his way to send us to places we do not like or uncomfortable with. That's not the message. The message is this: that for God to draw out of our lives the extraordinary things that he has prepared for us, the things that he has formed in us, the things that he has reserved for us, we'll only hear the potential of what God can do if we let him do it his way. Years ago, we were doing just a little mini tour in Texas. I'm going to spend an evening just jamming around the piano with a dear friend of ours who is one of the most talented pianists I've ever had the privilege to meet. A lovely brother by the name of Scott Roberts. And if you asked me whether or not I wanted to play the piano in front of Scott Roberts, the answer would be no. But I've already had to perform on stage with him sitting, literally looking over my shoulder. So when we were just jamming, there was a song of ours he wanted me to play. And so we played it. And people who know my music will know that when I play the piano, it's very much kind of just four on the floor, very flat, very just hear the chords, just chunk it out so it's something to sing over. And then a really strange thing happened. He was like, oh, I want to learn that. Well, it's only like 5 or 6 chords. There's nothing complicated in it. So I told him what the chords were. And then I went to play it. And I realized he was sat opposite me on another keyboard. He began to play the way I play. And I sort of looked at him and he must have sensed there was something weird going on in my face. And I was like, you don't have to play it my way. You know, don't try and sound like me. I only play like this because I can't do what you do. You know, I've met so many people over the years and they've wanted God to move, but as long as he moves within the confines of their comfort, as long as he moves within the limitations of their ability, as long as he just does what they've seen him do before in a way that they were able to articulate and understand, and they can sort of brace themselves for it.
Tonight, I want to encourage you to go to God and say, God, in my life, I want you to do what you alone can do. I don't want you to come and just sort of give me a little bit of extra stimulus to do more of the same. I don't want you to come and mimic what I've seen happening in the lives of other people. I don't want you to just make me like things that I understand. God, I want you to come and I want you to take up my life and I want you to play it with all of your skill and all of your wisdom to produce all of your beauty and all of your eloquence and all of your grace and your mercy and your kindness and your manifest purpose in the lives of the people to whom you will give the sound of my life. The sound of an instrument depends entirely upon the hand of the instrumentalist. So we can't simply pick out the parts or the movements which we want to play along to. We can't say, I think this is what's appropriate. God alone determines who he takes up, how he takes them up, when he takes them up, and what their contribution in that season will be. Even if in the past we've known God use us in one way or another, and we've become accustomed to it or comfortable with it, or we sort of like our place as we would see it in the body, the ministry of the different parts of his church is his business. And surrendering ourselves to his hand involves saying, God, you can play any tune you like. Sure, I'd love to be somebody who was involved in a healing ministry who never saw a sick person leave the building. If that's not what you have for me, that's okay. Sure, I wish I could have a ministry where I could just quietly meet with people in their homes, but if that's not what you have for me, it's okay. Whether our desire is to be seen or to be unseen, whether our desire is to speak or to do things in the quiet place, whether our desire is to do something that is works of power, our desire is to do things which teach and meet practical needs, whatever it might be. If we want God to be the one who uses and takes up our lives, we can't tell him do it at a more convenient time. We can't tell him do it later when I finished these things that are of concern to me. We can't say, well, I won't play with this one. Or I won't participate in something if that person has that position, because surely that would be mine. You have to say, God, according to your purpose, according to your perfect knowledge, according to your perfect timing, humble underneath your mighty hand, knowing that you alone have the authority and power to pick us up, to take up our lives and to exalt them in the perfect moment. See, no instrument can ever exceed or diminish the powers of its player. Years ago, when we first went to Nashville, the flights that we had to get us into the States, they were very clear that I couldn't protect my guitar. And so rather than take my favorite guitar and spend a fortune on putting a case around it that would make it safe in the hold, we realized that we could take a cheap guitar that would cost us less than buying the case we'd need to protect the good one. So that's what we did. And we bought a very cheap a guitar. We did as much setup on it as we could, but it was not the sort of instrument that you would want to be the first thing that you played when you got to sit amongst some people that all your life you'd looked up to. But there we are. It was better to take something than nothing. So that's what we did. And I was still feeling fairly sort of downbeat about the whole thing when very early on in our time at the music school there, one evening at the end of the day's activities, we were sitting in a common room and in came this very, very frail elderly gentleman. He was accompanied by a friend of ours, and she set him up in a sort of folding lawn chair that had some cushions sewn onto it to try and hold him up in position. And then with a beady eye that gave away that he knew what he was about a little bit, perhaps, he looked around the room to see who would lend him an instrument. And over the next couple of hours, he borrowed lots of different instruments. And one of them that he borrowed was my not very impressive guitar. And I sat there absolutely amazed as Earl Scruggs, whose name won't mean a lot to many of you, but if you're of a certain age, you'll remember his playing from the theme tune of the Beverly Hillbillies. But if you're into bluegrass at all, it's definitive. His banjo playing defined the sound of a whole generation. It's extraordinary in the roots of country music. But every instrument he took, even my battered, not very impressive, strung way too heavily to really give you much tune, but at least it held the thing so it was playable. And he made it sound like $1 million. The next day, I had my first guitar coaching session with a dear brother in Christ, Stephen Hill. And Stephen had played with many of the just legends of guitar music. And his own guitar he's gone home to be with the Lord now, but was a custom instrument made by Taylor Guitars for him, fitted to him because he was a giant of a man. Most extraordinary instrument. But he wanted to play my guitar. And so I was already feeling a little bit like, well, I've heard a sound come out of that I'm sure I can't make. And then sitting in a practice room, Stephen Hill picked up my guitar and he began to play. And I will never, ever again complain about the type of instrument that I have to play, because it could not diminish his skill. It didn't matter that, yes, it doesn't sound like his guitar and it doesn't have the depth of tone or those things. And it certainly, he was working a lot harder on my guitar than he would have been on his own. But to listen to the sound he could bring out of that instrument, there's no way that instrument could have diminished his skill. Two very different players, two very different sounds. But the reality is, it's the player that defines the sound. Most people you meet have allowed their lives to be played by all sorts of different influences, by family, by society, by the workplace, by their peers, by their friends, by their partners, whatever different pressures come into their life. They've ceded that ability to really be who they are. And the world says, well, you should respond to those constraints by being selfish, by being all about you, by focusing on yourself. I want to tell you that no instrument ever played itself. You're still being influenced by the people who have formed those thoughts in your mind. You're still being driven by the pressures and the needs and the things that are imposed upon you. The Bible says those that are made free by the Son are completely free. I want to encourage you tonight that you can't diminish the power of God, nor can you ever attain to it in your own strength or ability. But if you humble yourself under his mighty hand and you let him take up your life, then you will discover that it was made for things that you could not even dare dream or think. Things that the world would not credit, it was able to produce. Things that your peers would never be willing to give you the grace or the scope to accomplish. God is for you. He saw you before the foundation of the earth, and he purposed you, not only in the natural, but also in the spiritual, that when you came to faith in Christ, and if you haven't done that yet, it's very, very simple. Trust him. Tell him that you receive his forgiveness and you want him to be the one who takes up your life for his purpose. That you want to be made new, and I promise you, he will take you up in the perfect way at the perfect time. You'll become his the moment you get sheltered under his mighty hand. But God alone is able to fulfill in you the extraordinary good works before ordained, planned for you. That means for you to walk in. See, our verses tonight end with verse 7, which in our translation says, casting all your care on him because he cares about you. But actually, the word here is not really about cares as in just the things that upset you. A better understanding would be this: throw off all your fretful distractions, cast them onto him, for you are his constant focus, his desire, and his delight. You might not realize it tonight, but right now you have the full attention of God. Right now, all those things that you would worry about that would stop you from stepping into purpose, that would stop you from seeking him to use your life. That way you would say, well, I couldn't possibly do that, or I'm not sure that I want to step out and be visible, or I'm not sure that I want to act with authority. It's okay, because it won't be you. No instrument ever played itself, but rather if you place yourself in the hand of God, it will be his power, his works, his grace, his ability, his knowledge. And he cares for you. And so don't let things distract you. Don't let your fears distract you. Don't let the opinions of others distract you. Don't let your past experience distract you. This coming week, as we think about what it would be to be instrumental in God's purposes, we think about what it would be for God to take us up and to accomplish in us things that he delights in, things that he desires. We're going to do it with the confidence of children who know they're beloved, of those who understand that we are his constant focus, both collectively but also individually. That God gives you all of his attention. He hears your concerns. He knows your heart. He knows your thoughts before you think them, and he is for you. And he delights to choose you. If you'll just choose him first. He's ready and waiting. And his desire is that you should set aside. No, that seems too weak, really. This word literally means throw off. Throw off, just dump all of your fretful distractions. Let him carry them away. Because his purpose in your life is that you would discover the very things that he rejoices in having prepared for your good. I don't need to know you tonight to know that God has purpose for you. I don't need to think about your past to know that whatever it is, in this moment, you can choose to surrender to his hand. And he can lift you up. He can take up your life. He can use you for glory and wonder and beauty and for things that last. I don't need to consider whether or not maybe you're counted in or not, because this is for anybody. Anybody who's prepared to say, okay, Lord, I'm going to come under your authority, and I'm going to let the timing be yours and the purpose be yours and the power be yours, because you alone are able to take my life and bring out of it things that only you are able to produce. That's our thoughts for this evening. I'm looking forward to sharing more of the new series with you this coming week, tomorrow night. We start at 8 o'clock. It'll be 8 o'clock Monday to Friday. And we start tomorrow night, which is the 28th. 8 p.m. Our first session, we're going to set out from Romans 6:13. So if you want to go and have a look at that verse, it's Romans 6:13. That's where we're starting. And I'm excited to share that with you. I just pray that whether you join us live or if you're watching this on catch up, I guess you could catch up on that later as well. The sessions will be up there as usual. We'll post links into our socials. You'll be able to come back to the YouTube channel. It'll be queued up. It'll be at the top of the page, ready to go live at 8 o'clock. And we would love you to join with us. Harvest folks know they pray beforehand. And I really appreciate that they do, so that we're bringing this not as here's some stuff that we need to tell you, but here are some amazing truths about who God is, who his people are, what it means to be instrumental to his purpose. I've never been able to look at my old guitar the same way since I heard it played by these extraordinary musicians. Because now I know that if I work hard enough and I practice long enough, and if God gives me grace, I might one day hear the same sound coming out of my guitar that they could make it make. This week, we are going to celebrate together that God is able to take up people like us, people that the world wouldn't make a big fuss about, and use us to create something for his glory, for the good and the life and the encouragement and the strengthening and the gathering together of people that he loves. And there's no one he doesn't love. God willing, we'll see you tomorrow night. Our Sunday night next week will be as usual, and we'll be back for that, but we'd love to share something with you in the meantime. God bless. Have a great week.